This is a presentation about using facts, and everything in here is based on the book, Your Gut is Still Not Smarter Than Your Head, which I think everyone has received. And this book was written as an antidote to Blink. And if you know Blink, you know Malcolm Gladwell. Gladwell is, he looks like a nut. He has a lot of nutty ideas, particularly those expressed in this book. And he's known as the father of gut-based decision-making. It's scary to me. I should tell you that I just read his The Outliers. It's a great book. I recommend it to everybody. But this book is not a great book. It's been incredibly popular, and as I go around the country and meet with CEOs and CMOs, I oftentimes find Blink on the executives' desks or in their bookcases. They're reading it, they're paying attention to it, and they believe in it. They believe with Gladwell that with the right people in place, companies can liberate themselves from their obsession with data-driven decisions. Now, I've got to tell you, I work for some of the largest companies on the planet. I don't know a single one that's obsessed with data-driven decisions. I mean, it's more likely that a bunch of guys loaded with testosterone go in their war room and make a $100 million, $200 million decision without any facts. That's far more likely than that they're obsessed with facts. The center of the business solar system. I started this company, Yankelovich, Clancy, Shulman, and then after a number of years I sold it to Saatchi & Saatchi, and I took a summer off. And that summer, 15 years ago, I had an epiphany caused by two things. First, I read a wonderful book that I would recommend to everyone in here. The book is by Thomas Kuhn, K-U-H-N, and it's titled On the Nature of Scientific Revolutions. And Kuhn spent a lot of time in that book talking about the work of Nicholas Copernicus, who in 1540 had published De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, on the revolution of heavenly bodies. And that was the first time anyone had argued in print that the sun, not Earth, was at the center of the solar system, and that Earth was just one of a number of planets revolving about the sun. And people say, oh my God, he was a genius. I mean, this is the first shot fired in the scientific revolution. He was a genius. He was so creative. He had such wonderful intuition. And all of those things are true. But he also took 1,000 years of astronomical data and analyzed it with mathematical methods. It's estimated only 14 Europeans understood at that time. So with this balance of genius, of creativity, of intuition, with rigorous analysis of unimpeachable data, came Copernicus' revolutionary book. I loved it. It impressed the hell out of me. And then that same summer, I heard Peter Drucker speak for the first time, and he blew me away. You know, how many people have heard Peter Drucker speak in this room? A couple of you. Peter Drucker was a giant of a man, Austrian-born, and probably the greatest management intellect ever. And Peter Drucker said in this presentation, because the purpose of a business is to create a customer. A business enterprise has two and only two functions. Do you hear me? Two and only two functions, marketing and innovation. Marketing and innovation produce results. Everything else is a cost. Whoa. And then he went on. Finance is a cost. IT is a cost. Logistics and human resources are costs. It's marketing and innovation that produce results. I thought, holy shit, this is amazing. Basically, he's another Copernicus, and what he's saying is that marketing is at the center of the business solar system. So I decided to start another business, name it after Copernicus, and position marketing where it should be. Is the dean still here, or did he leave? He left. I'm going to tell the dean this afternoon that instead of having 10% of his faculty in marketing, he should have about 30% of his faculty in marketing. What do you think?
Yeah.
For much of my career, marketing was regarded as a secondary function in companies. It was regarded to a great extent as an art form. You certainly didn't measure it in terms of ROI. When I was at BBDO Advertising, you'd argue that you can't measure advertising in terms of ROI. But that's all changing, and it's all changed very, very quickly. Today, there are a number of firms out there, big, successful, great firms, that use econometric models to measure marketing performance. And now CEOs and CFOs and CMOs are demanding marketing accountability. And they not only want to know about the ROI of entire programs, they want to know about the ROI of specific communications vehicles, down to, what do you think the ROI is of investing money in search? What do you think? Give me a number. Do you think it has a payout, putting money into search marketing? Turns out it's the single best thing you could do. It returns about $5 for the dollar. Okay? And that's what they want, that kind of information. But they're unhappy. And they're not unhappy because they can no longer measure marketing performance. They're unhappy because now we can. We can. And CEOs and CMOs don't like what they see. That statement is from an HBR article written by yours truly and Randy Stone. Randy Stone is the CEO of MMA, Marketing Management Analytics, the largest econometric modeling firm in the country for marketing. Okay, here are some of the statistics on the state of marketing in 2010. Kind of shocking to a lot of people. ROI hovers around 0. MMA reports that, and this is based on data now 5 years old, that $54 are returned for every $100 invested in packaged goods advertising. It should say that. Why do we focus on packaged goods advertising? Because a lot of people still believe the biggest brains in marketing work for the P&Gs of the world. They don't, but that's another story. Today, that $54 is now about $35. $35 are returned for every $100 invested in packaged goods advertising. And for B2B advertising, the number, happily, is much higher. I mean, it's in the neighborhood of 0 to plus 5%. The Marketing Science Institute, which is a spin-off of the Harvard Business School, they published data a few years ago in which they found, based on a large-scale study, that a 100% increase in advertising expenditures yields a 1% increase in sales. That's staggering. That is staggering. Nielsen reports a 95% new product failure rate. The University of Michigan's Consumer Satisfaction Index tells us that satisfaction has fallen below 77%. C+ grades. I don't know about you guys, but if my kids came home from school with C grades, right? After they got spanked, you guys believe in spanking? I do. After they got spanked, I'd lock them up in the basement for a couple of days. Companies are getting C grades, C+ grades, for in terms of customer satisfaction, and here's a great one. Thinking about that, how many of you know about Fred Reichelt's Net Promoter Scores? Just raise your hand. Everybody knows about it. Somebody define it for us. What is it?
It's promoters minus detractors.
And what's a promoter?
Basically, you're 9 and 10, who score around 9 and 10.
9 and 10 on a scale having to do with recommending. I would recommend this company or brand, right? And what's the other group?
And then you drop out passive, which is 7 and 8, and then you take 0 through 6. So you take your 9 and 10, whatever that percent is, and you subtract.
Great. Okay. And what? So I've got the people who love companies. Take away the people who think you're awful. What is the average Net Promoter Score in 2010 for American companies?
-5 to 5.
Ooh, now that's a worse number than I've seen.
Really?
Okay, yeah. Number I've seen is 7. A 7, okay. But whether it's +7 or -5, it's still telling the same story. And the story is that people don't like us all that much. They don't like business all that much. We're not satisfying customers. And this is I think this is pretty scary. Now, when I go into a company and I tell them that the ROI of their marketing activities is close to 0, I tell them their new product failure rate is 90% or 95%. I tell them their customer satisfaction gets a C grade and their Net Promoter Scores are about 0. You would think that people would jump up and say, "Oh my God, we've got to fix that problem." Okay? They don't. They say, "Kevin, these are all measures of short-term effects, particularly the ROI stuff. Short-term effects. We're not interested in building a brand for the short run. We're building a brand for the long run. We're building brand equity." And yet there are at least 4 studies report that brand equity for America's leading brands is in decline. Well, when I say that, I tell people these brands are in decline. So you're not only not building a brand in the short run, you're not building your brand for the long run. And the answer is, something wrong with your facts. Who's to blame here? Who should get fired for marketing malpractice? And the answer is blink-based decision makers. Followers, now and forever, of Malcolm Gladwell. And here are some of the symptoms of blink-based marketing. Basing decisions purely on intuition. We were doing work for one of America's greeting card companies not too long ago, a couple of years ago, and they were doing fairly well. And then all of a sudden, sales and brand equity began to plummet. They called in my firm. They said, "You kind of do an autopsy of what's going wrong." We do a lot of autopsies. And we asked them, "Where did you ever get your marketing strategy from, particularly the targeting? Where'd you get that from?" And they said, "Our CEO had a dream. He had a dream. And in the dream, he dreamed about 5 different personality segments in America that buy greeting cards." I said, "Whoa, that's kind of interesting." I mean, personality research went out about 35 years ago. In fact, Frank Bass was one of the scientists who, in study after study, demonstrated the lack of value of psychographics in marketing. But I said, tell me more. And it turned out this guy, the CEO, had his dream. He had 5 different personality segments, and they developed their marketing activities to go after those 5 different segments. They even developed new greeting cards to go after those 5 segments. And further into the autopsy, we were able to find that consumer behavior was unrelated to these psychographics, was unrelated. This was a nutty basis for making marketing decisions. Gladwell might have loved it, but it was a nutty basis. And I was reminded when the dean mentioned Frank Bass that in one of Frank Bass's studies, he took a battery of psychographic measures to predict a couple of rather mundane aspects of consumer behavior, like coffee consumption, for example, soft drink consumption. And Bass was a genius with mathematics and statistics, and his team amassed a powerful array of statistical models to predict these mundane aspects of consumer behavior. And the best they could do was account for 3% of the variance in his dependent variables. And I'll never forget the closing paragraph in Bass's work, in his book. He said, if we have rolled out a cannon in this research, the cannon being a metaphor for all the powerful statistical models, if we've rolled out a cannon in this research to shoot a mouse, coffee consumption, we can take some comfort in the discovery that by itself, the best available cannon of modern multivariate statistics only shot 3% of the mouse. I love that line, and it's a telling story. Anyway, so here is this guy who has a dream, thinks the market should be segmented in terms of psychographics, organizes his whole company around personality segments, and it is a colossal failure. It's a colossal failure. No time to do it right. I mentioned to Paul, who will be speaking this afternoon, that I have a client who said to me when I said, "Gee, you told everybody you're going to be on air in mid-October with a new campaign, but the campaign you've developed isn't that strong. Your own data suggests it's not that strong." And she said to me, "Yeah, but I'd rather be wrong on time than right late." Wow. Wrong on time than right late. Meaning, I got to go with this thing, and if it's wrong, it's wrong, but I said I'd be on air on October 15th, and we're going to be on air. Here's a whole bunch of things. Ignoring real customer problems, I'll talk about that. Too few alternatives, I'll talk about that. Increasingly, in big companies, stat analysis is being turned over to R&D groups. And the R&D groups have engineers and they have physicists working in them. And they're very, very knowledgeable with respect to analysis. Unfortunately, they don't know a blessed thing about marketing. And rarely do I see anything coming out of these groups that anyone other than a physicist could understand, and the stuff is not very helpful. Okay, let me just move on here. Profitability I'll come back to. Okay, so let's talk about 3 steps that we could begin to take now to develop 3 sigma transformational strategies. And by 3 sigma, I mean 3 standard deviations above average, which will take us well into the zone of high probability. And by transformational, I mean literally. I'm not talking figuratively. I'm talking literally. Marketing programs that change brand trajectories, that change career paths, sometimes change entire companies and even industries. You and I should only be interested in developing transformational strategies. And I'll give you this morning 3 examples of transformational strategies. Okay, so step number 1 is to find the most profitable target. Phil Kotler at Northwestern, the dean of American marketing professors, he says that if you nail the targeting decision, everything good follows. If you fail to nail the targeting decision, nothing good follows. It's perhaps the most important element in the plan. It's essential to a positioning, a message strategy, an ad brief, a product and pricing strategy, a sales strategy. It is absolutely critical. And yet, most companies don't pay that much attention to it. This is a cartoon. One of my hobbies is writing cartoons, so this is one of my cartoons. This is a cartoon based on a visit to Procter & Gamble, which over time has become my largest client. But in this visit, the CMO said this: the world is changing. We need to take a serious look at our targeting decisions. Instead of going after 18 to 49-year-old women, we're going after 25 to 54-year-old women. And it was not said as a joke. It was said in dead seriousness, because that was the target for many of Procter & Gamble's programs. So I recommend to you, and this, again, everything here is discussed in the book, I recommend that you start with a market segmentation and targeting audit. How is the segmentation, targeting, and other things being done in your company today? And I use 12 dimensions, different measures in each one of these dimensions, and let me give you a flavor for it anyway. Okay, there are 289 measures in my audit. Each are measured on a 5-point scale. The measures are averaged for each factor. The factors are averaged for each dimension. And then you get a report on your segmentation and targeting overall. So, for example, dimension number 1 is the overall design of the segmentation study. And the first factor is actionability. Let me back up and tell you that a recent study done among CEOs and CMOs in America found that almost 80% of them said they had done a segmentation, targeting / positioning study in the last 2 years. And only 14% of them said they derived any value from it. It wasn't actionable. Okay? So my first factor is actionability, and here are some of the measures. So what do? You look at the marketing plans for the brand, you talk to the marketing managers, you discuss it with the agency, digital and traditional, in order to be able to answer these questions. So here are 4 measures, and you answer the question on a scale ranging from, it's a nowhere terrible practice to it's an absolutely best practice, okay? Utility. Is it clear that the different groups in the client organization that will be impacted by the study reached consensus on the study before it was undertaken? You'd be dumbfounded how infrequently that occurs. But in the audit, there are 3 measures that tap into that, and there are 4 measures that tap into clarity of objectives, and another 4 on the segmentation process. So we go through this, and you repeat it for all 12 measures. You do it for all 12 measures, and lots of factors, and 279 different things. And you end up with, this is a hypothetical example from work done for Coca-Cola. You end up with something like this. On the 12 dimensions, you get this score. And this is the score compared to best practices. And in this hypothetical example, Coke is getting a pretty good score, 85 in terms of overall design, but a terrible failing grade in terms of consumer segment profitability. That was one of the things in a previous slide I said is being missed today, and that is marketing people, marketing researchers don't tap into potential profitability often enough. In terms of product and pricing strategy, failing grade, big time failing grade, channel management of 52, implementation of 56. It's kind of a sad state of affairs, and the overall score is 68. Most brands achieve a score of less than 65 on this audit, and that is a failing grade. Again, spank the kids and lock them up in the basement for a couple of days. You know, for years, the prescription for this, the prescription for the CEO or CMO saying we did a segmentation study and it wasn't actionable is to just do another one, okay? But if Kotler is right and targeting is the most important business decisions, we've got to fix this because these audits reveal that most brands receive a best practices score of less than 65. My mother used to say this to me all the time. My mother used to say a lot of clever things. One of my favorites was, Kevin, if all you do is what you've done, all you'll get is what you've gotten. So far, you've gotten nothing. Okay? And she'd also say, if you're on the wrong train, every stop is the wrong stop. If you're going after the wrong target, every stop is the wrong stop. What are some of the ways that people segment the markets? Well, first is need segmentation. You know, what is that? Well, you give people a list of about 50 different attributes and benefits in the product category. You ask people to rate these things in terms of importance on a 5-point scale, extremely important, very important, somewhat slightly not important at all. And then you factor analyze the data, throw it into a cluster analysis, and it's fun. It's fun. In some client companies, the most exciting thing a brand manager will do that year will be naming the groups in one of these segmentation studies. You know, they can sit around for a week naming 7 groups or 5 groups. But it rarely identifies targets with different levels of potential profitability. Needs are just weakly related to behavior. I'll show you that in a little bit. And you can't find these groups in databases. So then this approach is not actionable. Okay. So some people respond by saying, oh, we're going to do lifestyle segmentation. This is like my greeting card client saying we're doing personality-based segmentation. Again, this is interesting. It's fun. Everybody can understand it. It might give you great insights into advertising copy. But lifestyles rarely predict brand choice or potential profitability. Again, it can't be found in databases, and it doesn't give you any understanding of the problems that these groups have. Okay, behavioral segmentation. This is the most popular approach in America. Anybody here from McKinsey? No McKinsey people? Anybody here use McKinsey? Okay. If you work for McKinsey or you use McKinsey, you would discover in the first 6 or 7 minutes that in every product category you can find people who buy more of the product or service than other people. This is a breakthrough. This is a breakthrough. And then you can say marvelous things like 20% of the decision makers account for 80% of the volume in our category. Everybody claps. This is exciting. Like this is new knowledge, okay? But heavy users are price conscious, they're deal prone. You win them today with a great offer, you lose them to somebody else's even better offer tomorrow. The segments have similar preferences and demographics and media patterns. You don't know anything about their problems. Danger. This is not a useful, actionable approach. I think I got one or two more of these. Demographics. This is the old Procter & Gamble, going after 25 to 54-year-old women in every category. You can find these women in databases. You can reach them differentially with media. Everybody can understand the target. But demographics don't predict behavior. These segments have similar preferences and behavior patterns, and once again, you have little insight into the problems that the targets are having. In all of these cases, these common approaches to segmentation are not actionable. Why aren't they actionable? To summarize, they don't identify the most profitable targets. There's no clear positioning and message strategy. Few insights into new product development. No media planning guidance. And you can't find the targets in other databases. The failure of common approaches to segmentation that I obsess over is this one. Most segmentation schemes don't tell you who are the most profitable targets to go after. So here's an illustration. Here's a segmentation study. Here are 5 different segments, okay? I'm giving you data on the share of market, the share of sales, the estimated share of potential profitability. ROI numbers range from 115 to 87. If I was doing this slide over again, I would have had it range from like 103 to 87, right? Because you might look at this and say, oh my God, we found segment A. That's a valuable group. It's not a valuable group. You want to see numbers like 150, 160, 200 up there. This is what you want to see. You want to see 5 segments with same share of markets that we saw a second ago, but a share of profitability numbers that give you ROIs, like in this case, the most profitable segment to go after is segment A, 45% of all the profits in the category. And note here, and this is not uncommon, that if you had a McKinsey strategy to go after the heavier user, you'd go after segment B, because segment B accounts for the most volume in the category. Share of sales, 34%. But segment A accounts for a disproportionate share of potential profitability. And I'll show you how to get to that in a few minutes. So if Malcolm Gladwell's approach to targeting is to make that decision with the speed of the knee-jerk or the eye-blink reflex, the fact-based approach says, let's analyze 50 to 250,000 different targets to find those forecast to be the most profitable. And this sounds like it would be a very difficult thing to do. But when you read the book, you can see that there are approaches which accelerate this whole process. And here's the systematic approach for doing it. Let's assume that you start with a large-scale survey, typically done today over the internet. In some parts of the world, it's done by telephone or in person. But you start with a large-scale probability sample of buyers in the category. And this is true for both consumer studies and for B2B studies. The work of my firm is about 50-50 between the two. But you start with that survey and you measure hundreds of different ways that the market could be segmented. And you have ideation sessions in the company to do that. Everybody gets a chance to say, I had a dream, and it was personality drives the category. But you don't stop with one person's dream. You look at a lot of things. Decision-making, motivations, brand perceptions, personality traits, everything, okay? You do this survey, And you test, you measure all these things in the survey, and you test all the different ways of segmenting the market against profit-related criteria. So I'm going to back up. I'll move ahead and then back up. Okay? Here are some proxies for profitability. Now, everybody looks at the first one, spending and market potential. But how much power, how much decision-making power does this respondent in the survey have over decisions in the category in his or her business unit or in the household? How much influence does this person have over peers and friends and family and colleagues? What's the blogging power of this individual? How responsive is this person to your brand? Where did they buy the product or service? And what are the margins? What are the margins in those channels? Do they have a problem you can solve? What's their retention potential? Very importantly, what's their level of price insensitivity? I don't want to target people who are price sensitive. I want to target people who are price insensitive. How interested are they in new products and services? Is the company, if it's a company client, is the company shrinking or growing? What's the lifetime value of this person? And can you find the person in databases? Okay. So coming back to this, you undertake this large-scale survey. You have hundreds of these variables on the left. You correlate them based on the survey database with these proxies for profitability, which are included in the survey. You take the winners from that exercise and you put them into one or another form of taxonomic analysis, and then you use statistical, managerial, and financial criteria to select the winning segmentation scheme and the winning target group. And you end up with something like this for Betty Crocker. 4 targets. The first one represents family traditionalists, 24% of the prospects, only 18% of the population buying ready mixes today, only 18% of the dollars, but 52% of potential profits for Betty Crocker. That's a great target group for them. Here's one, a B2B case, branded chicken. Look at the bottom here, heavy buyers. B2B now, heavy buyers of branded chicken. These are the buyers for all the large chains around the food chains around the country. $1 billion in sales potential, only $54 million in profit potential, ROI of only 40. So if you followed the McKinsey model, you'd go right off the cliff with that target group. In contrast, when you look up here, there's a group of people that cuts across different retailers of different sizes, but these are people who are seeking to develop a relationship with their suppliers. They want to know the suppliers. They want to trust the suppliers. They want to be able to count on the suppliers. They're only worth about a third as much as the heavy buyers in terms of sales potential, but they're worth 3 times as much in terms of profit potential. And that blue group with an ROI index of 212 is, ceteris paribus, all other factors held constant, the target to go after. Now, I'm not going to belabor this, but this is pretty clever. There have been a couple of papers published recently by an IT guy named Christensen in the Harvard Business Review, and he talks about job-based segmentation, segmenting markets in terms of the job the product is supposed to do. And there are some pluses to it. There are a lot of negatives, but this is a kind of a spin-off on that. This says when you're doing this large-scale survey, and if there's reason to believe that people buy the business product or the consumer product on different occasions and they're looking for different things, then ask them to report on, say, their last 3 occasions. You know? When did they buy it? Where did they buy it? What their needs were? What brand did they select? And assuming a sample size of about 1,000 respondents here, that would give us 3,000 different occasions. And then do a cluster analysis of the 3,000 occasions. And we end up, in this case, with, I think I've got 10 here, 10 different occasions. That's the vertical column. And in this study, I've got 5 people segments: food lovers, price-driven, June cleavers, empty nest loyalists, strategic seniors. And you can calculate, using the same technology, calculate the ROI value of each one of the segment occasion combinations. So you could say here that, gee, across the board, the price-driven are not a group to go after. Their numbers are uniformly pretty low, except one example there. But the food lovers and the June cleavers, they're pretty good across the board. However, there are some occasions when they're just much more valuable than others. Another thing that you should do is include in your segmentation study measures of what the target group listens to, reads, and engages with, and make sure that these segments will be findable in syndicated databases. So, for example, in your survey, we have information on what items people purchase or intend to purchase. We have measures of openness to the brand. We have buying orientation. We have demographics. We have media preferences. But I recommend to clients that they include in the survey measures that are also included in the media planning databases that they use on a regular basis. So when I do the segmentation study, I can match it up with another database. So for example, for Lexus, when we do this, we're able to estimate the ROIs for the media vehicles that reach the most highly profitable target for Lexus, right? NASCAR would be a place to go. TMZ is nowhere. Doing a study for GE, we wanted to look at affluent influentials. This is a corporate study. New Yorker is a great place to be. Jerry Springer would be an awful place to be. Yeah. For Boehringer Ingelheim Pharmaceuticals, we have a target group of innovative prescribers. We can actually get to the level of printing out the names of these prescribers. For Green Mountain Power, a case I'm going to show you in a minute, we've got price-sensitive, insensitive plant managers as the target, and we can print out the names across the country of these kinds of people. And the way you do this, very simply again, is because at the start of the project you identify databases that you'd like to link up with. And in this case, we had a database of plant managers. So we knew how to look up to them, and so we combined the segmentation study with the links, and we're able to print out the names of individual targets. I'm almost at the end of this segmentation section here, but this is something I'm very, very excited about, and that is that we're finding, and this is pretty easy to do, that if you ask people a battery of questions about their digital social behavior, you can put them into categories, ranging from authors. Those are folks who write their own blog or have their own web page. Commentators, they take part in discussions, but they don't write their own. Connectors, spectators, people who are just observing and watching, but they're not active. And then the totally inactives. And then what you can do is break out the digital types for the most profitable target. So this is saying here that for this particular target in this particular product category, the authors represent 16% of the target, but they have an index over 200. So our target group is disproportionately bloggers, and that's probably a very good thing, unless the bloggers are saying bad things about you. But increasingly, when you do a segmentation study, and this is just in the last 2 years, when you do a segmentation study, you include significant stuff in there about social media, and you tie them together. Okay, I'm going to end a discussion about targeting with a case. Do we have any folks in here from an energy company? Okay. This is about the power of transformation. Transformational strategy. Once again, I'm being redundant. A strategy that changes brand trajectories. It changes career paths. It changes an entire company and sometimes an industry. This is Green Mountain. Green Mountain was a little company in Burlington, Vermont. And they called me one day to say that they'd like to have a new marketing strategy for their brand because they wanted to brand kilowatt hours and take their brand nationally. Brand kilowatt hours. I had no idea what this guy was talking about. Branding kilowatt hours. So we spent hours over a couple of beers until finally, I started to get it. And before the transformation, basically what they told me is that the power industry is going the way of telecommunications. The existing paradigm is that electric power is a commodity. Price is the only attribute of importance. And this company wanted to take a significant share of this newly emerging kilowatt hour marketplace. So they did a number of research studies. They did the kind of study we've just talked about to identify the most profitable consumer and business targets to pursue, how to position their brand, what products to offer. They looked at consumer interest and B2B interest in a set of different positioning strategies. They did price testing, advertising testing, direct marketing testing. Here's a little company. But this little company was not going to bet the farm on Blink. They were going to bet the farm on fact-based marketing. So they brought in investors to pay to have all of this kind of stuff done. Okay? And we're talking now about segmentation. This is the result for them. Clean energy obsessed households represented only 19% of the population, but they were willing to pay more for energy if the energy was clean. About half of all the potential profitability in the category. So their choice was to target the brand against the upscale, clean energy obsessed households. They positioned the brand this way, and this is the I wrote this positioning, and this is the greatest positioning, not the greatest necessarily, but the longest positioning of my career, okay? Clean green power made from the raging rivers of North America, the prevailing winds, and the sun. No coal, no nuclear, no kidding around. And they took that strategy with heavy TV, print, radio, and direct marketing efforts into the first states in the U.S. that deregulated. Within 3 years, they became the #1 brand of deregulated power. Awareness and positioning were unchallenged in their markets. The Financial Times of London gives out an award each year for the Marketer of the Year, and competing against companies, at least 1,000 times their size, companies like ExxonMobil and Shell, Green Mountain Energy won their prize as Marketer of the Year. And at this award ceremony in New York at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, the chairman and CEO of British Petroleum walked over to the Green Mountain table. I just happened to be there. Walked over to the table and said, "Congratulations. Before next week is over, I would like to buy a major stake in your business," which he did. And this guy Hartley became a business legend. Transformational marketing, changing brand trajectories, career paths, sometimes entire companies, and even industries. That's the case. Okay, base your positioning on real customer problems. Positioning is your brand's raison d'etre. It's your brand's reason for being. It's the reason you're giving people to buy your product or service. It should be one or two phrases or sentences that you want to imprint in the heads. It's got to be clear. It's got to be succinct. It's got to be powerful. Clean, green energy made from the raging rivers of North America. Prevailing winds in the sun. Right? It's long, but it's exciting. And once launched, a great positioning begins to move people towards your brand. Here are some examples of slogans or messages that are reflective of past and present great positionings. I have a 7-year-old. Don't ask me how I have a 7-year-old, but I've got a 7-year-old. The biggest surprise in my life.
He's down in the basement right now.
That's right. I think this kid is going to spend a lot of time in the basement. We went to his soccer game last Saturday morning, and after the soccer game I said, hey, let's get some lunch. It's noon. And Neville said, oh, that'd be great. Let's go to Subway. I said, Subway? I had a bad experience working with Subway years ago, right? I didn't like the people. So as a consequence, I have purposefully not gone into a Subway restaurant in over a decade. But I said, Neville, why do you want to go to Subway? He said, it's fresh and healthy. His mother doesn't let him watch television. I said, Neville, where did you hear that? He said, oh, I was over at Calvin's house. Calvin's a 7-year-old buddy. I was over at Calvin's house, and I saw a TV commercial. It's fresh and healthy, Dad. So we went to Subway. That's an example of a very powerful imprinted positioning, which has done marvelous things for them. How about positioning? Where is it today? Well, roughly speaking, there are 3 types of positionings. On the left, there's tangible, product-based positionings. There's a mix. And then there's the favorite positionings of the last decade, which is ethereal, One ad executive recently called it transcendental. You know you're dealing with an ethereal transcendental positioning when you see a TV spot sitting there with, 3 or 4 members of your family, and no one can figure out what the ad was about. Okay, that's ethereal transcendental. Okay, they had their periods of dominance. The third column represents the percentage of strategies today, and over on the right, you have the ROI. So what's my message? My message is ethereal, transcendental, emotional strategies have a zero effect. Okay, and why do I say that? I say that because it's the way most, again, typically packaged goods campaigns, what they're based on today, and their ROI is wildly negative. Okay. Today, conventional wisdom says consumers control brand communication. Positioning as we know it is dead. A Copernicus study proved that positioning is dead, okay? In the sense that we studied the 2 leading brands in the 15 largest categories, and we asked folks a series of questions to try to find out which of these brands had a selling message, a reason for being, What's the selling message for, Coca-Cola? It's one of the biggest spending brands in America, Coca-Cola.
It's the real thing.
Hmm?
It's the real thing.
Can't hear.
It's the real thing.
You're a genius. Who said that? I didn't see. Who said that? Okay. A real thing was one of the greatest positioning strategies of all time, and and you remember it from a quarter century ago. And in a quarter of a century, every 3 years, Coca-Cola introduces a new strategy, a new slogan, a new message, and none of them have stuck.
Well, I'm old.
No. You're smart. You're smart. You got it. Okay? Okay, so we found that only 8% of brands had it. Then we hired Dr. David Lloyd, a content analyst, to study more than 400 30-second spots that we pulled off of primetime television. And we asked him to code the spots in terms of a number of characteristics. But one of them is, does it have a selling message? Does it give people a reason for being? And Dr. Lloyd's answer was about 7%. So it's kind of interesting. Only 8% of people say anything about it. 7% of the commercials tried to communicate a message. Oh, wow. This is the, I didn't realize this slide was in here. This is the greatest story of my career. Okay? The greatest story of my career. You're going to love this. I was doing some work. We developed a strategy for one of America's 5 largest companies. And they had a flagship brand, I can't mention it, a flagship brand that was in decline. It was in decline in terms of sales, in terms of profitability, in terms of brand equity. So they asked us to develop a strategy for them based on the segmentation, targeting, and positioning work I'm still going to show you. They asked us to develop the strategy, and we did. And they were so excited by the strategy, they asked us if we would share the results of the strategy with their ad agency, which was one of the 3 top ad agencies in the world. So would you share the results of this? Would you put on a presentation for the agency? I said, sure, we would. And we'll try to be very, very tactful. In preparation for that meeting, I had some of my people take a day and develop, I don't remember how many there were, but for the sake of argument, about 10 different ad concepts based on the strategy. That is to say, the boards, big boards, not storyboards, but just whiteboards with essential messages describing different types of advertising, okay? So I was ready for the meeting. So we went in and we gave the presentation, and happily, this giant ad agency represented by their CEO, was their largest account, their CEO, their CEO, the account director, the creative director, the research director. I mean, they had a pile of people there. They loved it. Oh my God, this strategy, this is great, you know. We love it. And then I thought, you know, I can't miss now. So I pulled out the 10-odd boards, and I said, and just to help you along a little bit, here are some examples of how this basic targeting and positioning strategy could be reflected in advertising. I'm telling you, it was the happiest day of my career. They're clapping, they're cheering. Great stuff, wonderful, I love it. So the client was kind of surprised by how much they liked it. And the client said, hey guys, if you like this so much, I have an idea. How about going back to your agency, assigning different groups in the company to work on a new campaign, right? And if Kevin's guys can come up with 10 ideas, you should be able to come up with 50 or 60. Why can't you come up with 50 or 60, and we'll meet here in another month, because we do have to, this is early in the summer, we do have to get a campaign on air in mid-October. Mid-October is a magic date in advertising. People, oh my God, great idea, terrific. The happiest day of my life, you know, professionally. So they went away, and they came back sometime later, and they surprised and disappointed my client from the get-go by saying, you know, we said we'd come back with about 50 ideas or 60 ideas, but the fact is, and we did. We came back, we had hundreds of ideas, but only two ideas were stupendous. Only two ideas. And we're going to show you those two ideas right now. Okay? So they showed the two ideas on storyboards. And these ideas, these campaigns they were recommending, were so unbelievably stupid, okay, that I wanted to cry. They were just awful. I had no idea what the ads were about. So in a room with about 50 people, my client put me on the spot and said, Kevin, what do you think of these ideas? So my mode of operation is to try to be diplomatic, not to embarrass anyone. I said, why don't we talk about that offline, but for the record, these are intangible, ethereal campaigns. They're different from what I expected. I should add that these two campaigns had nothing to do with the strategy. You're off in some other planet, okay? All right. So that night, the client and I talked, and Nancy said, what do you think? I said, awful. She said, yeah, I know. But what am I going to do? Because I've promised to be on air in the fall. And I said, my recommendation would be that if you can't get the agency to go back and do exactly what you want, then why don't you continue running the current campaign? She said, no, they'd never, if they couldn't do it in the months we gave them, they're not going to do it in another 2 weeks. So that's not going to work. I said, how about going dark? You know, not running anything. And she said, no, can't do that. Everybody's expecting a new campaign. So we talked about it, and she selected one of the campaigns, very reluctantly selected one of the campaigns. And they ran it. And they spent, this was a flagship brand. It was not a big spending brand. They spent $32 million over the course of 6 months on television alone with this campaign. And, 6 weeks later, we're back in the corporate war room, where we're reviewing the performance of the campaign. And the brand manager from the client company got up and he gave a presentation in which he showed that sales had deteriorated further and that brand equity was continuing to decline. So this was not good news. And then a rep from Sinovate got up. Sinovate is a sister company of mine. They are the 5th largest market research firm in the country. A rep from Sinovate got up and said, he talked about this, talked about that, and he said, now let me get to the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem is that in your marketing plans, you said that after this $32 million expenditure and 6 months of advertising, you would achieve 15% campaign penetration, meaning that 15% of the targeted population would be able to play back something about this advertising on an aided or unaided basis. Okay, 15%. He said, you didn't get 15%. Didn't get it. You didn't get 10%. You didn't get 5%. And now people are, what's going to happen? You didn't get 3% or 2% or 1% or 0.5%. We did not find a single living person in the target group who could play back anything about this advertising. Holy shit, With that, the management supervisor on the account at the agency, that's the highest level of ad executive, the management supervisor, who had to be one of the smartest people I've ever encountered, jumped up and took me by surprise when he said, Kevin, when we were here 9 months ago, didn't you say that this was an ethereal, image-laden campaign? I said, yeah, I said that. Well, in our experience at Pierce, Broad, and Shallow, that's my name for the ad agency. You got that? It's good. This is funny, guys. Come on. Pierce, Broad, and Shallow. In my experience, intangible, ethereal, image-laden, transcendental campaigns produce sleeper and subliminal effects. And this is not a word of hyperbole here. This is a direct quote. In which case, 0% awareness may be a good thing. It suggests that the campaign is really working. You guys are laughing. I should have asked you not to laugh out of respect for my client. But the fact is, no one laughed in that room. People were jotting down on their pads, look up sleeper and subliminal. What's he talking about? They continued to run the campaign for another 6 months, put another $30 million into it, and then killed the campaign and fired the agency. Okay? I think the number got up to about 3% at the end of $62 million. Okay, what are we talking about? We're talking about brands not having a positioning. So here's a case where the client tried to have a positioning, and the agency came back to where they love to be, and that's with something transcendental, a story that no one understands. And here's my cartoon about that. Welcome to Pierce Broad. This is a new business pitch. After I left my last agency, I promised I'd create an agency with a powerful, preemptive, unique positioning. That's why here at Pierce Broad, our slogan is, we make ads. What, you guys need a cup of coffee or something? This is funny. You get it? We make ads. What kind of a positioning is that? Is it an old-fashioned idea? I don't think so. Procter & Gamble has a definition of marketing, which I love. And they've been using it for 100 years. The discipline concerned with solving people's problems with products and services and doing it profitably. My notion is that if you can solve a big problem for people, okay, and you can do it with a marketing program which offers a very strong solution to that problem, you will crush, upper right, crush competitors, okay? And most marketing programs, in my experience, are down here. Small magnitude, not a problem at all, diddling around with poor implementation. No wonder ROI approximates zero. Okay, so what's the all-time most popular type of quantitative research for identifying problems and motivations? Researchers pull out 25 to 125, and they ask people how important each is. We did this before. Extremely, very, somewhat, slightly, not at all. Okay? So here's a project designed to help a company develop a new product. What are the most important dimensions? The most important dimensions in this category are the most important dimensions in every category. Okay? They are the most generic, banal price of entry items you could imagine. Okay? In contrast, contains taurine. Anybody know what taurine is? Nobody? A couple people. Okay? Contains taurine, makes you feel younger than you really are. Think about that one for a minute. What kind of a response should you get from people if you're doing a study for Pepsi-Cola, let's say, and you ask people, how important is it to you that the soft drink that you buy makes you feel younger than you really are? It's an idiot question. And people respond in that way. They say, it's just not important. Lowest price, low scores. Okay? This work was done to help yield Red Bull. Okay? The stuff at the bottom turns out to be much more important than the stuff at the top. Self-reports of importance are not the same as real problems, and here are the three reasons. People will say something is unimportant if they don't know anything about it. They hesitate to say anything that makes them seem superficial, like the soft drink that would make me feel younger than I really am. And they don't want to admit that they're price sensitive. So you've got to watch out for that. Okay, so how do you go about developing a positioning strategy? It could be based on attributes, on benefits, on target market characteristics, on occasions, on intangibles. It could be based on a lot of different things. In doing this work for a New England bank, we looked at about 60 different attributes and benefits, both tangible and intangible. And we put them through this little model, which is in the book. You guys don't need me to tell you how to do it. You could go out and start doing it tomorrow. First is, you don't ask people what's important. You ask them about what they desire. You use a scale which ranges from extremely desirable to extremely undesirable, so you're picking up the power of both ends of the scale. You then calculate the discrepancy between what people want and what they're getting with the brand they use most often. And then you do a regression to predict the likelihood of using different brands, but you do this regression for each individual person separately. It's not an aggregate level analysis. You've calculated this for, let's say it's 50 attributes. You've done this for 50 attributes. You've got 1 dimension, 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions. You take the weighted average of all 3, and you use that to calculate a new thing called motivating power. And then you take the motivating power, you drop it into a brand strategy matrix, and I am very, very fond of box number 1 and box number 2. Box number 1 are dimensions which are highly motivating and where our brand has it or we believe could have it. Okay? That's number 1. Over in number 2, white space opportunities, great for new product development. The characteristics are highly motivating, and no one does a good job of offering them. Okay? White space opportunity. And then positioning to me means providing a complete branding strategy. We know who the most profitable targets are, coming out of the same research study. We've got the key competitors. We've got insights into the targeting needs. We have the positioning conclusions coming out of the strategy matrix. We know something about the desired brand personality. And finally, the brand essence. That's positioning. Okay? And here's a great example for a New England bank of great positioning. Citizens Bank, the slogan that was developed for this program was "Not your typical bank." And this is a positioning which turned the industry inside out and upside down in New England. What's the most common positioning for banks today? Secure. Security. That's kind of a, yeah, I mean, it's in there, but it's a side benefit. The most common one, actually, when you measure it, is free checking. You know, we've got a good deal for you, free checking. And Citizens was giving away free checking. Okay, the bank's been around.
So this is not your typical bank. Reminds me of an uncaller, something that you're not, like everybody else.
Boy, you're pulling this stuff out of the past, huh? That's good. Yeah. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. You're right. Okay, so the bank's been around for a long time. I love this point 3, and that is they had research, the bank had research, which told them that customers, both business and consumer, perceive little difference between banks and very importantly suffered from massive inertia when it came to switching. At this point, I had had an account at Bank of America for about 15 years. I hated Bank of America, right? Every time I called with a question, I got put into a queue on the telephone that I could never get out of. I never got my answer, but I stuck with them. I stuck with them forever. And now I found I was just like everyone else, okay? They did a brand strategy study. They measured attitudes, behaviors, the stuff that we've been talking about. They were shown different positioning concepts, and they used that brand strategy matrix to find a positioning. The strategic choice. The chairman of the bank, Larry Fish, and his CMO, Teresa McLaughlin, they decided they were going to become the bank that made customers feel special. Okay? They wanted to offer extraordinary service. So what did they do? They extended branch hours on Mondays and on Fridays. They opened the bank for a half a day on Sundays. They launched a switch concierge service which promised to switch your account, okay, from whatever bank you were at right now to Citizens, and to put $200 in your account if you didn't take that money out for at least a year, okay? They expanded into grocery stores and into pharmacies, okay? They empowered people, they rewarded people for helping customers, and they launched this ad campaign, Not Your Typical Bank. Okay? What was the performance after 3 years? Penetration of the positioning hit record levels, highest level of customer satisfaction in its footprint, number 2 bank in the nation in terms of in-store locations. Assets grew from $3 billion to $160 billion. One of the 8 largest commercial banking companies in the U.S., despite the fact that they're only in New England. They're in parts of Pennsylvania and Ohio. I don't think they're anyplace else. Is that incredible? What did this transformational strategy do? Repeat after me. It changed the brand's trajectory, career paths, the entire bank, and the industry. Okay, last one, and we're running out of time. Nail the marketing plan. Message here is that the halls of marketing history are littered with examples of good products and good services that just had a lousy marketing plan, okay? The case of the escalating sevens. Let me illustrate that. You're launching a new campaign, and I suspect, whether you're B2B or B2C, that you only have about 12 key decisions that you could make. Targeting, positioning, ad execution, pricing, distribution, okay? Say 12 decisions. And the nature of those decisions varies from across different types of industries, but this set works in a lot of cases. So I've got 12 decisions, and I can assure you that in each one of these, for each one of these decisions, there are hundreds, there are thousands, in some cases there are tens of thousands of alternatives, right? But God loves you, and God loves you because you're Texans. Back on the East Coast, we always had the feeling that there's something about Texas that God loves. I mean, how is it possible, for example, that you have probably the worst football team in the country, but yet everybody loves the Cowboys, okay? All right.
I haven't lost the Browns yet.
Good one. Because God loves you, she whispers in your ear 7 choices to think about. Here are the 7 targets you should consider. Don't worry about the 10,000. Here are the 7 targets. Here are the 7 positionings. You got it? Okay. So with 12 decisions and only 7 things that God has told you to think about, how many different marketing plans could we develop? Okay? 14 billion. Okay? So what do most companies, I don't think I have a good slide on that. And let me just say this first. What most companies do is they reach into a hat and they pull out a couple of these, billion plans and begin to work on them. Now, if 5 to 10% of new products and new campaigns for established products achieve profitability within 3 years, it seems to reason that the more marketing plans you test, the more likely you are to find a plan that supports success. Today, it's normative to test 2 or 3 plans using simulation technology, and then you label the winning plan out of the 2 or 3 the optimal plan. I mean, that's what people do. It's insane, but that's what people do, okay? So my recommendation to you is to consider simulated test marketing. It is the single most validated tool in all of marketing research. Basically what it is a research study in which you measure market response to either a positioning concept or to an ad campaign or to a sales pitch. And then you take that data and you enter that data into a mathematical model which captures stuff like the things on the left here and uses that to, in conjunction with the research study, to predict the stuff on the right. And using this kind of technology, you can, this is for a credit card, you can observe what the effect is of the plan that you started with, which is the plan developed by the marketing managers. In this case, it's forecast to give you a 2.4 share of market, lose $28 million, and it'll take at least 5 years to pay back. Simulation technology gives you a lot of insights into, what's the effect of increasing or decreasing distribution on profitability? What's the effect of changing the advertising campaign? What's the effect of this or what's the effect of that? And based on that insight, you develop a new plan, the model-aided, manager-prepared plan, and that's better. And then finally, you can superimpose optimization technology on the input in order to find a financially optimal plan. And in this case, I've called it the model-generated plan. And this is forecast to produce $24 million in profits within 16 months, as opposed to costing you $28 million and having to wait 5 or more years for something to happen. Okay? So here's my last case, my last slides, and this is about Skol beer. From number 4 in Brazil to number 3 in the world.
He's the best one.
Huh?
He's the best one.
Best one. Okay? I should preface this by saying that I've spent years of my life trying to win business from Anheuser-Busch. I've thought for years that Budweiser was in terrible shape, lousy targeting, lousy positioning, lousy packaging, and that I could really help them, but they weren't interested. And you'll see why this case makes me very happy, okay? Brazil, third largest beer market in the world, 100 brands. The brands are undifferentiated. Skol was the number 4 player. The big brands were Brahma and Antarctica, which together commanded 60% of the category, okay? What kind of research did they do? Large-scale segmentation study, did everything we've been talking about, followed by a series of simulated test markets. Finally, marketing mix modeling was employed to develop a financially optimal plan. Okay, performance results. In just 3 years, they went from out of nowhere to the number 1 position in the Brazilian market. A couple of years later, it was the number 1 brand in South America. Within another 3 years, it was the number 3 brand on the planet, with licensing agreements that prevented them from coming into North America. That's why you don't see the brand here. And Carlos Brito, the lowly and lonely brand manager on Skol in Sao Paulo, is now the CEO of InBev, the world's largest company. And you're ready for this. 2 years ago, he bought Anheuser-Busch. So the Skol case represented the intellectual and financial foundations for punishing Anheuser-Busch for not doing the right thing. That's a joke, okay? But this is an example of changing the brand's trajectory, changing a career path, right? Changing an entire company and changing an industry. That's what you can do with transformation. And it all starts with highly profitable targets, a compelling positioning addressed to real problems, not intangible, ethereal, transcendental messages, but addressed to real problems, and a marketing plan designed to pay out in less than 3 years. So I'm ending up where I started. And this is what I aspire to, and I hope I've influenced at least some of you to aspire towards transformational strategies as well. You can do it. It's not that hard. You just have to be persistent. If Drucker were here, I'd close where I started. You know, he would say that, Kevin, your job, the job of everyone in this audience is not to defend what you did yesterday, but to invent tomorrow. We are all about inventing tomorrow, and we can invent tomorrow with transformational work. Thanks very much.